Hello everyone and welcome to Kimchi Crime Unsalted. This series is about Korean crimes that have gone unsolved even till this day. I, Walter, a C-grade profiling student, is going to do my best to try and find more information about these unsolved crimes. Most likely I won't get to find any new evidence because I'm not a police officer, but you can come along for the case. And today we have an interesting case for you. Have you ever thought why serial killers leave a signature? Well, according to a professor of forensic psychology at John Jay College of Criminal Justice in New York, signatures are ritualistic crime scene behaviors that are done for psychosexual gratification. There are many serial killers in the past who have left signatures with their victims. Some well-known ones. The BTK killer. BTK standing for bind, torture, and kill. The BTK killer even left an actual signature when sending them letters. And then there's the Boston Strangler. Albert DeSalvo strangled women with their own underwear. Today's cold case has their own signature as well. However, we're unsure if this killer is a serial killer or just a one-off. Our case takes us to Pocheon on November 5th, 2003. A 15-year-old middle school student at Dongnam Middle School in Pocheon by the name of Hyuna is walking home from her friend's house. She calls her mother at 6:18 p.m. to tell her that she is on her way home. But she never makes it home. She is last seen with her bunch of friends and last heard by her mother. Minute after minute, her mother starts worrying and finally calls the police to search for her missing daughter. However, no traces were found of Hyuna. No evidence, no eyewitnesses. Absolutely nothing. A parent's worst nightmare has come true for Hyuna's parents. November 28th, police discover their first lead, Hyuna's school items including a notebook, shoes and socks, a school uniform tie, and a school bag. These items were discovered roughly 7 kilometers south from Hyuna's house. December 22nd, Hyuna's sneakers and mobile phone were found on a pile of garbage. However, nothing else was found, and the case went cold once again. Desperate to find their missing daughter, her father, an army soldier who works on the base nearby their house, called upon his soldiers and also police to make a thorough investigation of the area where Hyuna went missing. Once again, no luck. Hyuna was last in contact with her mother at 6:18 p.m. During the call, she said she would be 5 minutes away, so we could assume that the kidnapping took place between 6:19 and possibly 6:40 in the evening. The distance between Hyuna's house and her friend's house is no more than 700 meters away. According to sources, the way she went home was a shortcut. From her friend's house to her home is a very scarce farmland. Not many houses are present. February 8th at 9 in the morning, Hyuna's body was finally found. Her naked body was left in a drainpipe 6 kilometers south of where she lived and 2 kilometers north of where her belongings were found. According to experts, Hyuna's body was found in a remote place only known to people living in the area. It is supposedly a shortcut of sorts to get from one place to another. It's not uncommon for killers who carry out premeditated murders to have a particular place in mind to dump the body. A place could have some symbolic meaning or familiarity. We can presume that Hyuna's body was found not too far from where locals go. There is a possibility that the killer could be living within the area or at least drives by there on a regular basis. This could be for work, but the reason why the killer might have placed her there is simply for pleasure. Covering the drainpipe she was put into was a large TV box. This box was actually big enough to fit Hyuna in and transport her without suspicion, which is what was presumed by experts. Hyuna was pushed roughly 150 centimeters deep into the pipe and lying in the fetal position with her hands by her sides. The drain pipe was roughly 127 centimeters in circumference. The way she was positioned in the drain pipe was quite unique. With her legs in a crouched position and her hands by her side, it seems that someone had the ability to place her in that pose that she was left in. It had been 95 days since Hyuna went missing and when her body was found, so her body was heavily decomposed, especially in the top half. The brain is the first organ to decompose after death, and for this reason there wasn't a lot of evidence that police could go by. However, given the lack of evidence and the fact that there were no damages towards the bottom half of her body, it's more than likely that Hyuna was strangled or asphyxiated to death. Sources didn't say that there were any blows to the head either. But as I just mentioned, the lower half of her body was still intact, and an autopsy was made to check for any DNA evidence. However, no DNA evidence was found in or on Hyona's body. Although there is one thing to note, Hyuna had her fingernails and her toenails painted red. This is also the reason why the case was named the Pochon manicure case. However, the strange thing about the painted nails is that they were not painted in the up and down stroking method. Instead, they were painted from one side to the other. The police, trying anything they could to get their next lead, was to go around and find stores that sold red nail polish and question shop assistants and owners. They did find one employee that seems to recall a male coming into the store and looking at red nail polish. He was contemplating whether to get the darker or the lighter shade. He was described as a man quite slender, feminine, and well-groomed. There was also another suspect that police looked into. This man was an owner of a stationery store. His van was reported to be near the location of where Hyona's body was found. However, he was later to be scratched from the investigation after lack of evidence. Another lead was to look at the foreign workers that were living in Pochon at the time. I'm not sure of the actual ethnicity of the foreigners there at the time, but after a few foreign workers were interviewed, thousands fled from the area of Pochon. Now, it doesn't specify where the foreigners are from. However, police made note that in cultures such as Japanese culture and Indian culture, they paint the nails red of women who have passed away. However, this planned to be another dead end, and in my opinion, it was scraping the bottom of the barrel. It really seems that police were focusing on Hyona's nails and toenails, especially the fact that they were red. As I mentioned earlier, there was a store employee that remembers a man in the store buying red nail polish. In the early 2000s, South Korea was a conservative country. Well, I mean, it is still a conservative country now, but it would have been more so back in the day. So seeing a male buying red nail polish would have been quite odd to see to most people. It's also worthy noting that back in the day, in the early 2000s, CCTV wasn't really a thing here in South Korea, especially in the country cities such as Pochon. I would also argue that in the 2000s, forensic science wasn't as advanced as it is right now. I know that back in the day, DNA evidence wasn't even used quite often in Korea. And like I've mentioned many times on this channel, the police back then weren't as experienced as they are today. But let's stick with the fact that the nail polish could be the main piece of evidence that we are looking for. Given South Korea's conservative values, schools weren't allowing students to use nail polish. So we can eliminate the fact that Hyuna might have done the nails herself. So maybe we can assume that the killer did. Another interesting fact was that the nails were painted from side to side rather than the conventional up and down strokes. Her nails were also very neatly trimmed, and no nail clippings were found on the scene. Now, is this something that the killer took away from Hyuna as a trophy? Maybe. It would make a lot of sense, as Hyona's underwear was also missing from the site. The police's next break wouldn't actually be until 15 to 16 years later when they received a call. It was from a woman who recalled an experience that happened a month before Hyona's disappearance. She told police that she was almost kidnapped by a male who drove in a white car. The male coerced her into getting into his car and asked a series of questions. One of the questions he asked was how old she was. When she replied that she was 20 years old, the male seemed a little shocked. Now the woman actually managed to escape, and the man drove off, never to be seen again. It was assumed that since the woman was 20, it was a little too old for this suspected killer. Now, one thing to take into consideration is that we shouldn't automatically link these two cases together. However, it was reported that this attempt kidnapping was only 2 kilometers away from where Hyona's body was found. According to the statement by the kidnapped woman, she made note that this man had very clean, well-groomed hands. He also put clear nail polish over his nails. He was pale and quite slender, and roughly between 170 to 175 centimeters tall. He was said to also be between his 20s and his 30s. She also said he had brown hair and brown eyes. Now this is quite similar to the description that the store employee also had. This was a 15-year-old lead, but it did lead to somewhere. A car workshop within the area of Pocheon. This is where the suspected killer worked. However, they ran into another dead end when it was found out that the person they were looking for had passed away of cancer. The police asked the other employees there if they remember any man of such description. One of the workers did say that the description did remind him of someone that worked with him not too long ago, in that he would constantly wash his hands and was less traditionally masculine. Now the reason why this lady reported this crime 15 years later was because she felt scared at the time, and now she's a mother, she felt sorry for Hyuna. If we were to assume that this so-called slender pale man was the suspected killer, here is what information we can gather. The male is available after 5 PM, which means he could be a regular worker, as most jobs start from 9 until 5. We can eliminate the possibility of a night worker, as it seems that if this murder was done for sexual pleasure, the killer would have spent some time with his victim. There is a possibility that this sexually driven killer had lack of patience and therefore wanted to do things to the body before he killed her, or even after he killed her. We can also assume that the male had a car, as the area I mentioned is very remote and would be very unusual for any kidnapper to take someone just by walking. The question is though, how did Hyuna get into the car? Was she coerced just like the woman before? Was this the same man? Here are some notes that I made on the investigation. Eyewitness testimonies, though important for court proceedings, can be influenced and misleading, especially over a period of time. Therefore, it means that they can give the wrong information. Now, Elizabeth Loftus, a well-respected American psychologist, said on the matter of eyewitness testimonies, just because someone says something confidently doesn't mean it's actually true. Now, I am not calling the person who was an eyewitness a liar, but I guess there are some things I need to question. Number one, if you're sitting in a car, how are you supposed to tell someone by their height? I imagine that would be quite difficult. However, you would have to give her the benefit of the doubt in this situation, as back in the early 2000s, the average height for a male in these 20s and 30s was between 170 and 175 centimeters tall, so I guess that could be a good possibility. Also, Hyuna was taken in the evening in Pocheon. Now, as you can see by the maps, there aren't a lot of lights in the area. Where the woman was kidnapped was in Pocheon, in an area that I don't think would have been very well lit. To recognize someone clearly in a dark car would be very difficult. However, as I said, I'm not calling this person a liar. But my biggest problem with this eyewitness testimony is that this person was also put under hypnotherapy to see if they can recall any scenes or incidences that they might have forgotten. For me, hypnotherapy just does not seem to be something to be relied upon. But you be the judge. Do you think hypnotherapy works within this sort of context? The attempted kidnappee also mentioned the fact that the car was white, which is no surprise because in the world I think white is the most common car color. But let's give this eyewitness testimony the benefit of the doubt. 2 eyewitnesses said that the male was slender, pale, and well-groomed, almost feminine-like. The employee at the workshop also remembers a person who was, I guess, less masculine than most men who work in the workshop. However, during his statement, he said that this person always washed his hands constantly. But we know that if you wash your hands constantly, it doesn't actually make your hands look good. In fact, you can damage your hands by washing your hands constantly and can lead to rashes. Maybe this person was able to keep his hands very clean and moisturized so it doesn't turn red. That's just something that we should consider as well. And though we don't know the exact job title of this suspected killer, isn't it very difficult to keep your hands well groomed, your nails extremely clean when you work at a car workshop? And I can't imagine that anyone who is very, let's say, OCD about these sorts of things would want to work in a car shop anyway. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I mean, it's not impossible that someone can keep their hands well groomed and still work in such a laborious job. However, it just doesn't all add up. Also, recalling the fact that Hyona's nails were painted from side to side rather than up and down. Now, I feel like if you are a person who is very careful, very clean, very well groomed, that you wouldn't make such a mistake of painting nails from side to side, especially if you are used to painting your own nails. And for it to be side to side, I think most people would know that that's not the way to paint nails. So, does a person who is very meticulous paint nails in that way? Is there some sort of sexual release that they get from doing it the wrong way? Here's my personal opinion on the whole case. Now, to understand how crime occurs, we must look at one theory. Cohen and Felson's routine activity theory defines crime in a way of 1. A motivated offender, 2. A suitable target, 3. The absence of a capable guardian. Now, all these fit Hyona's situation. I do think that the murderer was on the lookout for someone suitable to kill. However, it's very hard for me to believe that Hyuna was a premeditated attack. This is because Hyuna wasn't going through her daily routine from going straight from school to home. Instead, she went to her friend's house first, then she went home. It's hard to say whether the person who is the possible killer was following her from school to her friend's house, but it seems very unlikely. So, though I believe that this person was looking for someone to prey upon, I do think that there is some spontaneous element to this killing. It was simply a wrong place at the wrong time for Hyuna. I also think that the suspected killer was a normal worker, possibly working a 9-to-5 job. And again, Hyuna was supposedly 5 minutes away from her friend's house, and therefore this is why I don't think it was a premeditated attack. I honestly think that the clean nail man isn't the person that they're looking for, due to the many reasons that I've just mentioned. Now, give me some slack, because the evidence that I gathered were only from sources that were available to the public. And also, I will admit that Korea's profilers are saying that it could be this well-groomed person. But for me, I feel like this might not be the right person. What do you think? Let me know in the comments section. And if this content is something that you enjoy, then please remember to support the channel by liking and subscribing, and I'll see you on the next Unsolved case, or also the podcast as well. Until next time.